Good afternoon, thanks for coming. I'm James Martin. I curated this show. It was a privilege and honor to meet the Afentoulis family, Miltiadis, Marianna, and the scholar in the family, Despina Afentouli. Without any further ado, I introduce Despina Afentouli.
Thank you so much, James. Hi, I would like to take a moment to thank the president for the Miltiadis Arts Council, James Martin, who is also the curator of the Byzantium in Kingston exhibition, for the kind invitation to talk about the timeless contribution of Byzantine art. It's a great opportunity to talk in this special part of the Byzantium in Kingston exhibition that showcases the artwork of the iconographers Miltiadis Afentoulis, Marianna Afentouli, and the late Anna Contes Maguire. And of course, thank you all for your honoring presence and the media for the coverage. Dear friends, Constantinople was the bridge between ancient and medieval times. Based on the ancient Greek civilization, Byzantium developed new styles in all fields, including the architecture of churches and buildings, the art of mosaic, iconography, poetry, and literature. From the beginning to the end of the history of Byzantium, except for the turbulent period from the middle of the 7th century to the middle of the 9th century, Byzantine literature kept in close contact with classical Greece. It reflects the synthesis of Byzantine culture from different cultural elements. Byzantine art handed over to humanity artworks of timeless importance, blending the Greco-Roman tradition, Eastern influences, and Christian spirituality, creating a unique art. Byzantine art contributed greatly to the expression of the spiritual and political spirit of the Byzantine civilization and inspires until nowadays. From Constantinople, Byzantine art was spread to almost the entire Mediterranean, but also to the east and Armenia. The first Christian emperor, Constantine the Great, moved the capital of the empire from Old to New Rome, and on May 11, 330, the city was founded as the spiritual lighthouse of the world, and Virgin Mary became the patron saint of Constantinople. Byzantium had an anthropocentric state tradition and harmoniously combined the ancient Greek tradition, the Roman state organization, its legal system, and the Christian religion. It was a commonwealth of many people and introduced for the first time in history the institutionalization of the relationship between citizen and state. It was then that Byzantine iconography, Byzantine music, ecclesiastical poetry, hymnography, sculpture, architecture were developed, schools and libraries were built, laws were codified, administrative and economic policy and social welfare flourished, with the creation of corresponding institutions such as poorhouses, nursing homes, and construction projects. In 324, when Constantinople was founded, the city turned into an artistic center with an emphasis on Christian elements. Three were the main periods that Byzantine art was developed: early Christian and the early Byzantine period, from the 4th to the 7th century, iconoclasm and Middle Byzantine art from the 8th to the 12th century, and the Paleologian period and late Byzantine art from 13th to 15th century. A main characteristic of the early Christian and early Byzantine period is the coexistence of the Roman tradition with the late antiquity standards and Christian influences. It was then that the royal style was created in churches as a form of expression of early Christian architectural art. Hagia Sophia, with its impressive hemispherical dome, is, from an architectural point of view, the most important model for all Byzantine churches. It was in the 5th century the Emperor Justinian built and founded Greek Orthodoxy with a temple of Hagia Sophia, dedicated to the wisdom of God. The art of the early Byzantine period played a decisive role in the later artistic excellence in Byzantium, as it blended the Greco-Roman culture and the Christian spirit after the recognition of Christianity as the official religion. It reached its peak in the era of the Justinian I. By that time, Byzantine art was defined by the Roman ideal of magnificence and technical skill, the Greek sense of harmony and measure, and the Eastern spirit of decorativeness and imagination. In the painting art, the themes that were initially chosen were inspired from Hellenistic themes, such as landscapes and symbolic representations. Byzantine paintings were characterized by flatness and lack of perspective. Gradually, and mainly in the east of the empire, strictly religious themes were chosen, with icons, wall paintings, and decorative mosaics of temples. The mosaics initially were preferred to cover surfaces such as floors of houses, palaces, or temples, and the interior walls of churches. The themes were mainly inspired from religious symbols or themes from the Holy Bible, but also from allegorical themes such as the Good Shepherd, that you can also see behind me, that brings back the prodigals to the path of faith. Such example, the mosaics in the mausoleum of the daughter of Roman Emperor Constantine the Great, in the mausoleum of Galla Placidia in Ravenna, as well as in the Church of St. Mary the Great and St. Peter in Rome. A new architectural type of the time was the domed basilica. Elements from classical and Hellenistic antiquity were gradually being left behind. In sculpture, naturalistic standards were gradually replaced with a more decorative style, and excellent examples of art were created in mosaics, icons, and illustrated manuscripts, in miniature artworks, and in objects made of precious metals, gold or silver, which have survived to this day. And if you ever go to Greece, to the Byzantine and Christian Museum in Athens, you have the opportunity to see the Asia Minor relics that many of the Greeks brought with them following the Asia Minor catastrophe. The Byzantine period dates from the reign of Heraclion in 610 to the accession to the throne of the Macedonian dynasty in 867. It basically marks the end of the post-Roman tradition. It was a time that art was strictly structured with transcendental form. The disputes about the worship of divine figures and their artistic depiction were a trigger for the writing of a rich spiritual work. And for this reason, icons were painted in areas outside the Byzantine state, which were under the Arab rule, where the decrees of the iconoclasts did not apply. During the 7th and the 8th century, icons were found at Sinai, since the making of icons never stopped there. The iconoclasm was succeeded in art by a new rule regarding the iconography of churches. The illustration inside the church follows a specific order with symbolic meaning. During the second half of the 9th century throughout the 10th century, illustrated manuscripts flourished with miniatures, usually decorating religious texts. Byzantine art flourished especially during the Macedonian dynasty, especially in architecture, where the cruciform temple with a dome dominates, while the basilica type was still preserved. The churches were characterized by a greater elegance and simplicity, aiming at the spiritual uplifting of the faithful. The continental and insular octagonal type of churches was a new architectural type, which was named after the places where monuments were saved in mainland or insular Greece. The materials that were mainly chosen were bricks and rough or carved stones. Sculptural art was mainly focused on geometrical decorative themes and was directly linked to architecture. Most of those that have survived are part of architectural buildings. The Comnenian dynasty was a second period of Renaissance in Byzantine art. The Basilica of St. Mark in Venice is perhaps the most important work of that period. The late Byzantine period starts from the occupation of Constantinople by the Franks until the fall. That was a time where Byzantium lost its power as a political and cultural center. There were no particular architectural differences in relation to the past. However, they were more diverse, with the creation of combination types such as basilica and the octagonal. Morphological influences were observed even on the Gothic architecture due to the influence of the Franks, with the pointed arches as their characteristic element. Similarly, the standards of the mid-Byzantine were applied to the icons, while they were thematically enriched with the childhood and passions of Christ. You can see here one icon of Jesus Christ from the Passion of the Christ. The life of Virgin Mary, there is also an icon with Annunciation there, you can also see, as well as with representations from the Old Testament. In painting, there was a more subjective approach of traditional themes, emphasizing on the face's expressions or the figure's movements. In the late Byzantine period, the art of the portable icon flourished more than ever. During the Palaiologos dynasty, it was perhaps the last period that Byzantine art flourished, mainly due to the fact that there was an interaction between Byzantine and Italian artists. For more than 1,000 years, from the end of the 5th century until the fall of Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire was the cradle of civilization throughout Europe. Following the Dark Ages and the fall of Constantinople in 1453, came the Renaissance and an age of exploration. And just to remind you, it was a time that Christopher Columbus was in a search of India. By that time, he was in the Aegean Islands, and obviously, most possible, he had with him Aristotle's Meteorologica, where Aristotle explained how he found out that the Earth, the globe, is a sphere. So by that time, Columbus could not travel through the east because the Ottomans had blocked the way, so he had to go from the west, hoping to find India. And the Renaissance period was marked by the revival of classical Greek philosophy art and culture in Europe, but the difference was that this was happening without Hellenes. For Hellenes, the fall of Constantinople under the Ottoman rule was a setback. There was a pressure for Islamization, which was a blow to the Byzantine Empire, prosecution, displacement, desecration of artwork followed. So for the Greeks, it was a period of time that they experienced the Dark Ages by that time. And it should be noted here that the fall of Constantinople, along with the Asia Minor catastrophe later in 1922, were considered the two national tragedies. But the fall of Constantinople did not have historical effects only on Hellenism, but also on the whole Europe. That's why the fall of Constantinople was marked more than any other fall of a city in the world. It was the beginning of an important geopolitical change with consequences in the Balkans and generally in Europe, and it marked a turning point in world history. For about a millennium, Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire were the stronghold of Christianity and civilization. The walls of Constantinople kept away the opponents of Christianity. Constantinople transmitted Christianity to Europe, preserved and passed on the knowledge of the ancient Greek philosophers, and was characterized as the only beacon that shone in the darkness of the Middle Ages. The Ottoman presence was gradually established in the area of present-day Greece, outside the Ionian Islands, and some other areas during the 15th century. The reasons that led to the conquest were economic, political, military, religious, and social. Historians argue that the countdown for Byzantium, however, began in 1204 with the fall of Constantinople by the Frankish Crusaders, with a definitive end to the fall of the city by the Ottomans in 1453. The biggest problem faced by the Emperor Constantine Palaeologos was the dispute between Unionists and anti-Unionists, those who supported the union with the Catholic Church and those who rejected it. Especially after the final schism of the two churches, Rome and Constantinople, in 1054, the ties between the Christian states were broken to a greater extent. After the fall of Constantinople, the city was deserted and plundered. The survival of the Greek nation was identified with the continuation of its traditions, with the main support of the Orthodox Church. The conditions of survival were extremely adverse for Hellenism. The memories of those who fled from Constantinople to the French-occupied Cyprus were revived in 1571 with the Ottoman conquest of the island. The consequences of the fall were soon felt by the Europeans, as the Ottomans did not stop in the Balkans but continued to Europe. The Austrian writer, journalist, and biographer Stefan Zweig noted that mankind would never know how much the world of the spirit had lost in the plundering of Rome, of Alexandria, and of Constantinople. Although the fall of Constantinople under the Ottoman yoke interrupted the renaissance of Greek culture and letters, before the Greeks could establish themselves in the West, as it happened in the case of the Renaissance, Byzantine culture was spread to the West through the Greeks who fled to the Greek islands that were under Latin occupation, such as Crete, Rhodes, Ionian Islands, and Cyprus, but also in other areas, such as Venice. Scholars fled to Western Europe with their classical Greek manuscripts that were translated, and they transferred classical Greek education and spread the teaching of the Greek language. This way, they enriched also Italian Renaissance and the spirit of humanism with their translations. A great role was also played by the printing houses that were established initially in Venice and then in Greek communities in European cities. Byzantine culture in Asia Minor, although officially eventually dominated by Islamic Koch culture, played a pivotal role in shaping a significant part of popular Turkish culture. And Ottoman culture preserves still Byzantine elements. Architects built mosques according to the Byzantine Pelagian churches, and administration is based on the Byzantine example. In Crete, Rhodes, Cyprus, and Ionian Islands, areas that were outside the Ottoman rule for a longer period of time, there was a considerable commercial activity and prosperity, resulting in the creation of an educated aristocracy interested in the advancement of arts and letters. The French and American revolutions inspired a struggle for liberation, as did Neo-Hellenic Enlightenment and its main representatives that contributed to the national awakening that led to the Greek Revolution of 1821. For Hellenism, liberation from the Ottoman yoke was also linked to the desire for spiritual liberation through the arts and letters. Hellenism not only survived but left behind national consciousness, the Greek language, and the Greek Orthodox Christian faith. 4 centuries, more than 400 years, under the Ottoman yoke, and Hellenism maintained its principles and values, keeping its flame alive for freedom. After the fall of Constantinople, the spiritual tradition of Byzantium contributed to the preservation of the spiritual identity of the Balkan people. Russia aspired to become the third Rome, adopted the double-headed eagle on banners, and introduced the Byzantine ritual. In the years of humanism and the Renaissance, the spiritual tradition of Byzantium remained in Western Europe. Western European states found in Byzantium the source of the ancient Greek spirit. Even today, the ecumenical patriarchate is a timeless symbol of the Orthodox faith, and the Church of Hagia Sophia, an architectural masterpiece and a monument of world cultural heritage. Hagia Sophia was and remains a symbol of the Byzantine Empire. The double-headed eagle facing east and west, as you can also see here, which was the emblem of the Byzantine emperors, remains as a flag and a decorative symbol in the ecumenical patriarchate, in the Orthodox churches in Greece and Cyprus. At the same time, it's a national symbol and flag of the Serbs, Albanians, Montenegrins, and other people, an element that demonstrates the influence of Byzantine culture. Byzantine architecture, especially in religious buildings, can be found from the east to the west. Byzantine painting influenced the later painters of the Italian Renaissance, and Byzantium continues to this day to inspire people religiously on a global level. Byzantium is experienced as a mystery for the faithful through the Eastern Orthodox Church, with the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople as a reference point. The Byzantine Empire protected Europe from opponents, as well as from the time Europe needed to recover from the Dark Ages. Byzantium contributed significantly to shaping Orthodoxy. Eastern Orthodox Church is the second largest Christian church. and humanity received a long-term and deep influence in both the Western and Eastern worlds, while even today, the traces of Byzantine civilization remain indelible. The Byzantine Empire continues to influence today in the religious art and architecture and laws of Western states, Eastern and Central Europe, and Russia. From a political point of view, the Byzantine Empire was undoubtedly the heir of the Roman Empire. But from a spiritual and cultural aspect, Byzantium was directly related to Hellenism. In addition to the Greek language, which was the national language of the time, the libraries in Byzantium contained all the knowledge of ancient Greek literature, and unfortunately, a large part actually of it has not preserved until nowadays. Eastern Europe, as a vital part of Europe, is interconnected through orthodoxy, and this is communicated through the Byzantine iconography. Byzantine iconography is an art of holiness. It's a symbolic art. As you can see, it has a lot of symbolisms, even in the icons, and represents modernism. Byzantium was the foundation of the first empire of Europe, said Eleni Glykadziarveler, who is an internationally acclaimed Greek-French academic Byzantinologist, who also added that Byzantium is Europe because it's Greek-speaking like Athens, Christian as Jerusalem, and has adopted all the Roman administration. Dear friends, considering that need for protection of the Byzantine cultural legacy from desecration, change of use, and exploitation, as we would do for any cultural heritage that is threatened, it's our duty to protect our historical memory and pass it to the next generations. Thank you.
I would like to introduce you the iconographers that are present. Marianna Afentouli, my sister. Miltiadis Afentoulis is my father, who's also representing the icons.
Thank you very much for coming today. I hope you understand some different things, some things that you mostly aware about iconography. And, thank you.
Σας ευχαριστώ, thank you very much όλοι που ήρθατε εδώ. Ιδιαίτερα ευχαριστώ τον Πάτερ Δημήτριο, ο οποίος με τιμά με την παρουσία του και έχω αγιογραφήσει την εκκλησία του, τον Άγιο Γεώργιο στο Kingston, το οποίο είναι μια μεγάλη έκθεση για μένα, είναι αιώνια που έχω κάνει εκεί. Σας ευχαριστώ θερμά που ενδιαφέρεστε για τη βυζαντινή τέχνη. Είναι μεγάλη μου χαρά και τιμή.
So, in order to just translate very quickly, my father said, thank you all for your honoring presence, for your interest in Byzantine art. It's an honor. And also, special thanks to Father Jim, who is honors with his presence. We encourage you to visit, actually, the church, St. George in Kingston. It's a beautiful church with a really inspiring spiritual leader. And there you can also see what we were discussing today, the 12 feasts, all this. And actually I want to mention, these are the largest icon paintings my father has ever done in his life. in terms of dimensions. They're really big, really inspiring. Okay, some of the biggest. I know for sure because and it's all gold leaf. All the church is really, really inspiring. It's like going to a museum. Even if you don't believe in that religion, doesn't matter. You can go and see something really inspiring artwork. And the church is very beautiful also. Thank you again. Thank you so much. I should acknowledge also my mother, who is always close behind the stages, Anastasia Afentouli. And Marianna's two little kids, Stephanos and Anastasia, who are also inspired so much from art, and they seem to have a talent also, I have to say that. So I think if my grandfather, Vasilios, my father's father, was still in life, I think he would be very happy about that, because he was a great inspiration for all of us. Yes.
Θέλω να ευχαριστήσω πάρα πολύ τη σύζυγό μου, την Αναστασία Αφεντούλη, η οποία μου έχει σταθεί για 30 χρόνια δίπλα μου. Ο Father Jim το γνωρίζει πιο καλά από όλους αυτό. Είναι πάνω στη σκαλωσιά, δουλεύει, είναι αγιογράφος κανονική, αλλά είναι αόρατη. Και την ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.
Yes, just a really quick translation. My father thanks his wife and our mother, who for more than 30 years, you're together more than 30 years, 40 years, they're together, but let's say they were together forever. And they work together. My father says that my mother is also an iconographer. She goes up the scaffolding. It's not an easy work to do. It's not just the talent to do that. Placing the iconographies on the dome or in different parts of the church is really hard. And my mother is there with my father doing the work, and she's always behind the scenes. So it's really important to say that. And I'd like to thank you all again for being here. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Don. Don is the director of the school, the Greek school in St. Constantine and Helen Greek Orthodox Church in West Nyack. Thank you so much, Don Coffin, for your honor present, and all of you, each one of you. We thank you deeply from our hearts.